Welcome back to the Terminator Captain Painting Guide. In this one, I'm going to show you how to paint his power sword with a blue glow effect. So for this, we're going to need to use Lead Belcher, Stormhost Silver, Baharoff Blue, Griff Charger Grey, Titanium White. Because we're using metallics, we're going to need to use Lamium Medium as a thinner. We have our Lead Belcher here and a small pool of Lamium Medium. Just going to work it in to get the right consistency on the Lead Belcher. It's quite a sticky paint and it doesn't dry the same as normal Citadel base paint. Once you think it's ready, back at a thumbnail test, and that looks good. So all we need to do is apply a couple of thin coats to the power sword blade. Be careful of these gold areas. You don't want to paint those. And after a couple of thin coats, we've got good coverage on both sides. The next step will be to shade it with Griff Charger Grey. I don't need a lot. That's far too much, in fact, what I've got on my palette. And it's got a good consistency. You shouldn't really need to thin this one, but if you do, just a little bit of Lamium Medium. We're just going to coat that evenly across the sword blade. What we need to be careful of is not letting it pool too much. A little bit of pooling is okay, like that piece there along the blade. But that much would be excessive, so we don't want that. It's easy enough to wick away. It's a subtle effect, so don't worry you can't see it. We can add more. In fact, let's do that. Let's thoroughly dry this off and layer up using a contrast paint. That's that first shade dry. And this time I'm only going to apply it to the underside of the sword, the part of the sword that is facing toward the ground. Once you're happy with that, make sure it's not pooling too much, thoroughly dry it again. And it's fully cured. I think we're going to go for a third layer. These contrast paints, it's one of the much more translucent ones, so the effect is far more subtle. This time I'm only going to do the front half of the blade. It'll look much darker when it's wet. As it dries, the tone will come right down. And that's our third shade layer done. Now this is very convincing at tricking the eye that the sword is facing downward. And you wouldn't get this effect on a 32mm miniature unless you exaggerated it. So what we're going to do next is do a highlight with Mithril Silver. That's the third layer dry. We're really trying to emphasize, exaggerate the shading effect. So we know that that blade is facing downward, but we need to trick our eyes that it is definitely facing downward and it's much darker than the top side. This is just something to do with scale. We're going to go on to the highlighting step next, and for that I'm going to use Stormhost Silver. Small amount of Stormhost Silver, so I have my original well of Lamium Medium there. Just going to work it in until I get that consistency I want. Always test it on the back of your thumbnail. Maybe a little bit too much, so I work in the neat silver. And just keep doing it until you're happy and you have good control on your brush. This is a different technique to what we used before on the other steels, which were a dirty steel. This is a nice clean steel. He's taken pride in his weapon. He's maintaining it to the best of his ability. It's also an energized blade, so it's going to burn away any dirt. So yeah, I'm going to highlight, but I'm not going to use the tip of my brush. I'm just using the edge. And do that on all. Oh, that might need gluing back in place. These miniatures, because they're made of plastic, are so easy to repair. Again, just using that edge. It's slightly trickier going down the blade like that. So what I do is I just take my brush. I'm still going to use the side of it. So I'm going to make sure there's no excess thinner or medium in there. And I'm just going to gently place it at the base and drag it up in one movement. He says, and immediately did it in two. Let's try that again. So we have nicely highlighted the center of the blade there. I've also caught the power nodule, which is cool, so I don't have to go back and do that. Let's repeat that on the other side. Cool. There we have it. Nice edge highlights. We can add a few more things there. So if you can put a few sort of where the blade would catch the light, you can just add those in. Like so. A little parallel one. We'll say if you're doing this, make sure they are parallel lines or it won't read correctly. And on the reverse of it as well. Yeah, it's a little bit of interest. Right, okay. Well, you can just leave your blades at this edge, that sort of bluish tint. We're just going to push it a little step further and make it look like those power fields are on. To make a convincing looking energy field, I take my Barrow blue and I'm going to thin it heavily with water. So we're taking a translucent paint and we're just making it so it's almost invisible. Invisible's the wrong word. Okay. Right, can you see how the paint is separating as it comes off my brush? Like that did? Okay, that's perfect. So now I take the brush and I'm just going to wick away all the excess water on the bristles. I'm going to start around where the power field generator is, which is this wire. I'm just going to paint around in it. I'm not going to paint over it if I can. I just want to paint in and around it. Doesn't matter if it goes into the lettering. I think that adds to the effect. And it doesn't have to be overpowering. Do that on both sides. Okay, that's one layer done. Now, there might be a bit of a time jump here or a skip forward. This is going to take 5 to 6 layers to build up this effect. So let's see if the fast forward button works. And you can see after 5 to 6 layers, we've got a nice opaque, faded in light blue, like it's a glowing blue energy source, which is exactly what we're after. So it's not quite there yet because I want a little bit of crackling energy coming off it. So for that, I've got some titanium white ink. And for this one, I've even cracked out the really nice brush. Just because I want to keep a nice tip on it. And the Chinese brushes won't quite be able to do this. Specialist tool for a specialist job, using the back of my thumb. Let's test to make sure I can do some nice, tiny, and yes, I can, intricate little white lines. I've got to try and take that over to the miniature. That's the next problem. So practice this as much as you can. The trick I use to painting these power sources is I do one line coming off it and one branching line, and I radiate that effect from the power source, which is this nub in here, which I'll paint in white. And now the super careful bit. Oh, too much. Oh, that's not my best work. It's a very small area to work in. We're talking millimeters. Right. Give it a go. See how you get on. Some power saws are much better for this. This is particularly tricky because it has this writing embossed onto the blade. That's one way to do power swords. There's at least a dozen I can think of. You can just paint it as a silver power sword. You could paint it the same way I did the rest of the steel, gunmetal steel. Have a really worn out, battle worn blade. Maybe the power field generator's damaged. He's just hitting them with a blunt edge now. It's a Space Marine, so it's going to work. Cool. Right, well, hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you on the next one.